Hello and welcome back to this tutorial where today we're going to focus on different types of numbers within Python. Okay, so I've already alluded to the fact that we have different types of numbers in the previous examples when I was talking about whole numbers or integers. Here I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview as to what they are, and you can work through this Jupyter notebook in kind of very specific detail. Here I'm just going to provide you with a high-level overview of what's going on. Okay, so essentially integers refer to whole numbers, and that means that they have certain specific types within computer science, within programming, and certain functions might only accept integers as opposed to other types of numbers or other types of data inputs. And often you might specifically want to work with integers rather than either floats, so decimal numbers, or other types of information types if you're trying to look for a specific example. Okay, so the key example I usually give is if you're working out an optimization for the number of hospital beds that you're going to have, you're not going to be able to have 15.3 hospital beds. You're going to have to round that either down or up so that you've got an integer value. And obviously I would recommend that you probably always want to have the higher value in that particular case, but that's going to be case specific, okay? So that you end up having more than the estimated number of beds that you estimate for that particular problem. So integers are important. If we multiply two integers by each other, so 14 multiplied by 3, we get an integer answer. So here we go, we've got 42 as a particular answer here. And we're also able to work through more complicated integer problems using the BODMAS or the PEDMAS examples that I gave in the previous video, and that's going to again produce an integer value here, so minus 175 also being an integer. We're also able to convert different numbers into integers. So for example, if we have 2.000, which is a decimal, so a float, we can convert it using the inbuilt Python function int. So 2.000 is going to end up becoming a whole number once we use that particular int function. Okay, we could do pi, we could do 3.14, and it's going to actually round down to the value 3. Okay, so that's producing a round whole integer number when you use that int function. So I alluded there to the fact that we have float values, so these are decimal values, and these basically are going to be numbers which have a decimal place within them. Okay, so pi is a good example of the float that I'm talking about in this particular instance. So we can enter 3.14 as printed out to the console, and we're able to transform it if we would like. Well, we don't need to in this particular instance because it's already a float, but we could transform that into some other type of value. Here we might be able to just transfer a particular integer that we have. So this is just 1 as an integer, and we transferred it into a float using the float function, which is inbuilt in Python. So here we've got 1.0. And then we could change it back into an integer using that integer function that we just covered. Okay, so we could find out what type any particular number is. So we have this type function which is inbuilt in Python, and if I was to put in pi here, then basically it's going to identify that this is a float because it's 3.14, or if I was to put int here, so I'm going to wrap our 3.14 pi value in an integer function, so it's going to turn it into an integer, it's going to then become 3, and then the type it should indicate is an int. Okay, so this type function is kind of useful when you don't quite know what data type you might be handling with. It's going to tell you what its initial state is. So you can now have a good go at those exercises, examples that I've provided down here, and hopefully that will give you an opportunity to use some of those functions which I've just produced. So it's nice to see you all. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next session. Thank you. Goodbye.